Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Richard, founder of Short Term Rental University. And if you're new to the channel, let me just take a moment and introduce myself. I'm currently a professional real estate developer, and in my prior life, I was a professional investor. I ran a $4.5 billion hedge fund on Wall Street, and now I've turned all of my time and attention towards real estate development in the Airbnb space because it's just so lucrative, and I want to share with you exactly how to think about this opportunity. So on this channel, I share with you a lot of tips and tricks and things that are working, as well as my insight into investing in the Airbnb space overall. So if you find this video interesting, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel now. Today's video is about the backlash that cities like Toronto and Paris are coming out against Airbnb. All of these things that have been occurring for the last couple of years, there's now legislation and changes that are occurring at the city level, and I want to share with you sort of my thoughts, not only on those individual cities, Toronto and Paris, but also the implications for communities as they start to regulate and reduce the opportunity set for Airbnb, because I don't think it's necessarily well thought out. So for those of you who don't know, I'm going to read to you a little bit about this. Airbnb faces a backlash in Toronto and Paris. The rental company is hit by a clampdown in Canada and unrest in France. Airbnb has come under fresh pressure on both sides of the Atlantic, with Toronto winning a major victory against the proliferation of ghost hotels and Paris denouncing a risky deal between the Olympic Committee and the short-term rental company. After nearly 2 years of appeals, a tribunal in Ontario has ruled in favor of the bylaws passed by Toronto, Canada's largest city, aimed at reining in short-term rentals. The new rules force operators to live at the homes they list, including those posted to Airbnb, limits them to listing 3 bedrooms at a time, and forces them to register in order to rent out the space. In recent years, Toronto has grappled with housing shortage, with vacancy rates for the rental units hovering around 1.1%, below a healthy rate of 3%. Much of the frustration for the crisis has been directed at Airbnb. Critics argue it incentivizes landlords to remove rental units from the long-term market, and research suggests the presence of Airbnb has removed thousands of rental units from the company. The San Francisco-based company spokesman said Toronto's rules would, quote, unfairly punish responsible homeowners, but it would work with the city as the bylaws went into effect. Finally, John Tory, the Toronto mayor, said, "This is good news for Toronto residents and a step in the right direction when it comes to regulating short-term rentals and keeping our neighborhoods livable." This decision could lead to 5,000 long-term rental units returning to the market, according to the tribunal adjudicator Scott Tossaw. Whatever the number, one fact is indisputable: each dedicated short-term rental unit displaces one permanent household. That household must find another place to live, he wrote. Interesting. And this isn't entirely dissimilar from Paris. In fact, the Paris mayor has threatened to severely curb and even ban short-term rentals in parts of the city if tighter restrictions are not put in place. Last month, the French upper house approved a measure allowing local authorities in France to reduce the maximum number of rental nights to between 60 and 120, but it's unlikely to pass. Interestingly, Paris is one of the top markets in Airbnb and short-term rentals all over the world. And so what's going on here? Toronto's thriving, Paris is thriving, and yet there's a backlash against things that are bringing tourism and tourist dollars and spend into the communities. And the reason that they're, against all of this, in theory, is because somewhere along the way, they've determined that real estate owners, landlords, people who have invested hard-earned capital, and entrepreneurs, they've determined that a healthy vacancy for these entrepreneurs is 3% versus the unhealthy 1%. So let's just stop and think about that for a second. So I, as an entrepreneur, do I find 3% vacancy healthy, or would I prefer 1% vacancy? Well, clearly I'd prefer less vacancy and more money in my pocket. And we live in a capitalist society. So perhaps, France is approaching socialism. They've got a lot of, benefits and perks that we don't have in the United States as far as healthcare and the number of hours they work and so on. And so maybe in a more socialist environment, we don't care so much about the entrepreneurs that are investing risk capital. But in a entrepreneurial society where people are chasing opportunities and investments and financial freedom, capitalism generally dictates that money will be invested in the places where they get the highest reward. And so if you're now limiting opportunities for capital to invest, you're also limiting perhaps some of the most innovative and disruptive people spending time, money, and energy in your city. At first glance, it may not look like a big deal, right? Like we just stop short-term rentals because they're ruining our neighborhoods and it's displacing the middle class. And nobody wants to do that, and I don't believe in that, and I don't encourage or support that, but I'm just questioning the facts here. Well, so if we stop short-term rentals today, it feels good. It feels like an immediate victory. We just saved our neighborhoods. We just saved our middle class. We're doing things right. The vacancy rate's at 3%. But that's a point in time. That's one moment, right? Like, empires change. Things change. Toronto, 100 years from now, may no longer be relevant or important. Or Paris, 100 years from now, may no longer be relevant or important if you don't bring tourism and investment dollars, and it's not a world-class destination that people want to come and visit. If you make it more challenging, people are looking for ease and opportunity and excitement. So if the world wants to stay in Airbnbs, by restricting that, and I'm not saying it has to be all or none, there should be regulation, there should be safety, there should be permitting, there should be things that work for both the city, the entrepreneur, and the guests. So enough about the news. Let me share with you my thoughts and my reaction to this. And let me just be the first to say, I have no vested interest in Paris or Toronto or any other city. I do have a lot of vested interest in doing things responsibly and for the right reasons that are long-term and sustainable. And I'm a big advocate of responsible hosting and community and neighborhoods and regulatory and safety. So I'm a big proponent of having some measure of political involvement so that it's sustainable, but I'm not a big fan of all or none, white or black, black or white. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and the consequences of being binary, it's on or it's off, have long-lasting implications in the future. So it may feel like a victory for whoever's voting for this right now in Toronto or in Paris, but the question is, what does it look like in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? Has this little legislative change that's set to protect what they're calling the middle class and saving the neighborhoods and so on and so forth, has it actually benefited them in 100 years, or has it actually hurt them in 100 years? Is the community and the neighborhood thriving? Is there new money coming in and new investment and new people coming? Or did perhaps it stall? And just realize, the inevitable things that you could never imagine in a million years. Empires crumble. Look at Rome. Look at London. Look at New York. Look at the importance of the USA. Look at the rising importance of China. I mean, things change, and the way that things change is through innovation and disruption and capital flows and investment in new opportunities, and governments actually embracing all of these things and creating smart, sustainable solutions, as opposed to just, we're blocking it, it's not allowed, or you can only rent 3 bedrooms. And well, if you have a 5-bedroom house, that's effectively binary, on or off. So I don't have all the answers for Toronto or Paris or for the legislators. I only have one person's opinion. But generally speaking, it's bad to limit capital flows. I think that does more long-term damage than it does short-term good. And I just want to share with you an anecdote. So does Paris and or Toronto, do they ban Amazon? Because I'm sure that the advent of Amazon and Amazon Prime has hurt their retail. Right? So there's stores that are now vacant and it's for lease. You walk around New York City, everything is for lease. I think it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 storefronts are vacant, and that's due to the fact that there's a new, disruptive, better way that consumers prefer to do business, and it's called Amazon and Amazon Prime and a 1-hour delivery. But they don't ban that, and yet people suffer. I walk past vacant stores all day, every day. There used to be great retailers, wonderful business owners and so on, but you can't protect that. At the end of the day, things evolve. And I think that there's a real shift in consumer desire to stay and live like a local and be in places that don't support huge hotels. And while you're doing the right thing for protecting the hotels and the lobbies, and you think you're protecting the individuals that live there, in reality, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough time. And so I just urge people to be conscientious and thoughtful about the long-term implications of their regulatory positions and not be short-sighted or limited and say, this is wrong, this is new, I don't like it, it doesn't really work, we've had a lot of complaints or whatever. The way that Jackson Hole has done it, the way that Crested Butte has done it, where they introduce permitting and safety and fire inspections and rules and limitations that make sense, but still continue to encourage entrepreneurial capital flow, capitalism, so that the areas continue to thrive and create new opportunities and new jobs. That's really important on a go-forward basis. So the point in time that we're looking at, 2019 today, that's a very short data set. And just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it'll work in the future. So I encourage politicians of all cities everywhere to think about sustainable and repeatable, responsible hosting solutions such that investors continue to find great opportunities, reinvest in the area, new blood comes into the area, new jobs are created, new opportunities, because on the long-term basis, that's really exciting and encouraging, and that's what's going to make your city retain its top billing or grow. But curbing all of these things may actually have a deleterious effect, unintended, unforeseen, unexpected, but really not a good one either. So I have no idea whether I'm right or I'm wrong. These are my personal concepts today, but I think ultimately banning Airbnb in any area is short-term win, long-term lose. I'd love to hear your comments below. Let me know where I'm right. Let me know where I'm wrong. I'm sure this is going to be, really a two-way discussion, and I encourage that, right? Like, that's what it's all about. So go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel, friends, and let's see what happens over the next 20, 50, 100 years and the importance of having short-term rental laws that are repeatable, sustainable, and encourage responsible hosting.